Elaine Parker once told me, "Nobody is irreplaceable." 3 weeks later, the company's $430 million system collapsed in exactly 1 hour while I didn't lift a finger. I just sat there, sipping my coffee, watching the desperate messages flood my screen. They thought I was just another cog in the machine. Wrong. I was the foundation. And when the foundation vanishes, everything falls. My name is Julia Morgan, and I've spent the last 6 years building something nobody else understood. That Thursday afternoon at 3:15 p.m., I sat in Elaine Parker's corner office, watching her shuffle papers while my promotion request hung in the air like smoke from a dying cigarette. "Julia, you know how much we value your contributions," Elaine began, her voice dripping with corporate sweetness, the kind that makes your teeth ache. She adjusted her designer glasses, the ones that cost more than my monthly car payment, and leaned back in her leather chair. "You're a solid team player, really solid." "Solid, like a brick in the wall, nothing special." "However," she continued, and I knew that word would slice through whatever hope I'd carried into this room, "the director position requires someone more strategic, someone essential to our operations. And frankly, Julia, you're not irreplaceable. Anyone can do what you do." The words hit me like ice water, but I kept my face neutral. Years of corporate poker had taught me that much. "Anyone," I repeated, letting the word roll off my tongue. "Elaine, I single-handedly rescued the Hartman Industries integration when their $120 million contract was about to implode. I've maintained 99.99% system uptime for 4 consecutive years. Last month, when we had that security breach at 2:47 a.m., who did you call?" She waved her hand dismissively. "That's operational work. Julia, important, yes, but not strategic. We need vision at the director level." Vision. Coming from a woman who couldn't tell a server from a microwave. "I've redesigned our entire logistics framework 3 times to accommodate growth." I pressed on, though I knew it was pointless. "The predictive routing algorithm I developed saves the company $4 million annually. The real-time tracking system can be maintained by any competent engineer," Elaine interrupted. "Look, I'm not saying you haven't done good work, but good work doesn't make you essential. It makes you reliable." Reliable, like a Toyota Camry, gets the job done, nothing fancy. I watched her straighten a photo on her desk, her and the CEO at some charity gala, both grinning like sharks who'd just spotted a wounded seal. That photo said everything. Elaine Parker had climbed the ladder not through competence, but through proximity. She attended the right parties, laughed at the right jokes, and most importantly, she knew how to take credit for other people's work. "I see," I said finally. Standing up, my legs felt steady, which surprised me. I thought I'd be shaking with rage or disappointment. Instead, I felt something else entirely: clarity. Elaine's expression softened into what she probably thought was sympathy. "Don't take it personally. Julia, you're doing great where you are. Not everyone needs to be a director. The company needs worker bees too." "Worker bees. We do all the work while the queens sit in their offices, growing fat on our honey." "Thank you for your time, Elaine," I said, moving toward the door. My hand on the handle, I turned back. "Just to clarify, you're saying the work I do isn't essential to this company's operations?" She laughed, actually laughed. "Julia, no offense, but if you left tomorrow, we'd have you replaced within a week. That's just business." "No offense taken," I replied, and I meant it. Because in that moment, watching her smug face across that massive desk, I didn't feel offended. I felt something much more dangerous. I felt inspired. As I walked back to my desk, past the cubicles filled with people who had no idea what kept this place running, a plan began forming in my mind. Not a plan for revenge, that word was too simple, too emotional. This was going to be education. Elaine Parker thought I wasn't essential. She thought anyone could do what I do. Time to test that theory. Most people don't understand what it means to be an invisible architect. They see the building standing tall, admire its gleaming windows and marble lobby, but they never think about the foundation buried deep in the earth. Holding everything together, that's what I was to Northbridge Logistics, the foundation nobody saw, nobody appreciated, until it cracked. 5 years ago, when I joined this company, their logistics system was a joke. Excel spreadsheets scattered across departments, email chains that went nowhere, and a tracking system that crashed if more than 10 people logged in simultaneously. The board had just approved a $430 million modernization project, and guess who they handed it to? The new girl with the computer science degree and a dangerous amount of ambition. I built that system from nothing, not from scratch, from less than scratch, from the digital equivalent of rubble and good intentions. Every line of code, every database connection, every API integration, it all flowed through my hands. While Elaine attended leadership seminars and networking brunches, I lived in the server room. While she was learning to speak corporate buzzword bingo, I was teaching myself 3 new programming languages to make sure our system could talk to our clients' ancient infrastructures. The beautiful complexity of it all was that I designed the system to be interconnected in ways that weren't immediately obvious. The inventory management system didn't just track packages, it communicated with the route optimization algorithm, which talked to the driver scheduling module, which integrated with the customer notification system. Pull one thread, and the whole tapestry could unravel. But here's where I was clever, maybe too clever for my own good. I documented everything, meticulously, 200 pages of technical documentation, complete with flowcharts and decision trees. I'd even created video tutorials for the major processes. On paper, anyone should have been able to step in and take over. On paper. What I didn't document was the logic behind my decisions. Why certain systems talk to each other in specific ways. Why the backup processes ran at 2:17 a.m. instead of 2 a.m. Why the load balancer was configured with those exact parameters. These weren't random choices. They were carefully calculated decisions based on traffic patterns, client behaviors, and system quirks that I'd observed over thousands of hours. To someone reading my documentation, it would all make sense, until they tried to change something. Then they'd discover that my beautiful, logical system was actually a maze. A maze where I'd left all the street signs but removed the understanding of why the streets went where they did. Elaine never bothered to learn any of it. In 5 years, she'd visited the server room exactly twice, once for a photo op when we hit our first $1 billion in processed transactions, and once when the AC broke in her office and she needed somewhere cooler to take a call. She'd never asked how the system worked, never wondered why our uptime was so phenomenal when our competitors struggled with weekly crashes. At quarterly meetings, she'd present my work as team achievements under her leadership, and I'd sit there, invisible, while she collected accolades for my sleepless nights. The most telling moment came during last year's security breach. At 2:47 a.m., our firewall detected an intrusion attempt. The automated systems I'd built caught it, isolated it, and neutralized it before any damage was done. But protocol demanded human verification, so the night security called Elaine. She called me. "Julia, there's some kind of alert thing happening," she'd said, voice thick with sleep and irritation. "Can you handle it?" I'd handled it, like I handled everything, and the next morning, she'd stood in front of the board, explaining how her team's proactive security measures had saved the company from a potentially catastrophic breach. That's when I'd started making my documentation just a little bit more interpretive. Nothing wrong, nothing that would cause problems, just enough ambiguity that you'd need to understand the why, not just the what. Call it insurance, call it paranoia, call it the quiet rebellion of someone who'd been invisible for too long. Now, sitting at my desk after that disastrous meeting, I pulled up the system dashboard on my screen, green lights across the board, everything humming along perfectly, like a Swiss watch I'd built with my bare hands. Elaine thought anyone could do what I do. She thought I was replaceable, interchangeable, just another cog in her machine. Time to show her what happens when you remove a cog that's actually holding the entire mechanism together. I opened my documentation folder and smiled. 200 pages of perfect, precise instructions that would make complete sense to someone who understood why I'd built things the way I had. Too bad nobody had ever bothered to ask. The decision to pull back wasn't dramatic. No grand resignation letter, no bridge-burning speech, just a quiet shift in priorities that would echo through the company like a whisper becoming a scream. Friday morning, I arrived at 8:30 a.m., not 6:30, like usual. The early morning hours were when I'd typically handle the overnight error logs, preemptively fix issues before anyone noticed, and optimize the system for the day's traffic. But I wasn't essential. right? So I stopped being exceptional. My team noticed first. Marcus from the night shift left his usual sticky note on my monitor. Jules, weird spike in latency around 3 a.m. Cleared up on its own, but thought you should know. Old Julia would have dove into the logs, traced the anomaly, and patched whatever vulnerability caused it. New Julia filed it under within normal parameters and moved on to my officially assigned tasks. Morning team, I announced at our 9 a.m. stand-up. Quick update on priorities. Going forward, I'll be focusing exclusively on my core responsibilities as outlined in my job description. Any requests outside that scope should go through proper channels. Sarah from Customer Integration frowned. But you always help us with the API modifications when... Those should go through the development request queue, I interrupted gently. I need to ensure I'm not overstepping my role. The room fell silent. They all knew I'd been the oil keeping the gears turning smoothly, handling a dozen unofficial tasks that kept departments from grinding against each other. But if Elaine wanted me to be just another worker bee, then that's exactly what she'd get. By lunch, the first cracks appeared. 3 client tickets sat unresolved because they required cross-system knowledge that technically wasn't in anyone's job description except I'd always handled them before. An integration with a new vendor stalled because someone needed to adjust the firewall rules, and the network team said it was a database issue while the database team insisted it was network-related. Usually, I'd have fixed it in 5 minutes. Instead, I forwarded the email chain to my manager with a note. This appears to be outside my scope. Please advise on proper routing. The beautiful thing about malicious compliance is that you're following the rules. Every rule, every guideline, every bureaucratic checkpoint that normally gets bypassed in the name of efficiency. I became the model employee if the model was designed by someone who'd never actually run a business. Wednesday brought the first visible consequence. Peterson from Major Accounts stormed past my desk, face red, phone pressed to his ear. I don't care whose job it is. The Hartman shipment is showing delivered, but their system says it's still in transit. Someone fix this. I knew exactly what was wrong. A time zone conversion issue in the API that I'd been manually correcting for 2 years while working on a permanent fix in my spare time. But time zone conversions weren't in my job description. I kept typing my assigned report on last quarter's backup procedures. That afternoon, Elaine herself appeared at my desk, first time in 6 months. Julia, Peterson says there's some issue with the Hartman account that you usually handle. I looked up, expression pleasantly neutral. The time zone sync problem? Yes, I've been managing that informally, but I realized it's actually a cross-departmental issue. I've submitted a ticket to have it properly assigned. Her eye twitched. Can't you just fix it like you usually do? I could, I said carefully, but that would be exceeding my role as defined in our recent discussion. I wouldn't want to overstep. After all, I'm sure whoever you'd replace me with would need to follow proper procedures. She stared at me for a long moment, then spun on her designer heels and stalked away. By Friday, the whispers had started. Departments were missing deadlines. Simple fixes were taking days instead of minutes. The system still ran. I wasn't sabotaging anything but all the informal patches. The midnight saves, the preemptive fixes, those had vanished. I documented everything meticulously, every request I declined, every task I redirected, every issue I didn't preemptively solve, not out of spite, but out of precision. If they wanted to play by the rules, I'd show them what their rules actually meant. That evening, as I packed up at exactly 5 p.m., not 7 or 8 like usual, I noticed something interesting on the system dashboard. Error rates up 12%. Response time increased by 8%. Customer complaints rising. All within acceptable parameters, all following proper procedures, all heading toward a cliff that only I could see coming. I shouldered my bag and headed for the elevator. Behind me, the overnight team was already gathering. Worry etched on their faces. They knew something was wrong but couldn't quite pin down what. I could have told them, could have warned them about the storm brewing in our perfectly documented, properly channeled, officially approved system. But I wasn't essential. Remember, just another replaceable cog in the machine. Time to see how well the machine runs when the cog stops doing everyone else's job too. Monday morning arrived like a hurricane wearing a business suit. My phone started buzzing at 6:45 a.m. 17 missed calls, 43 unread messages. I silently turned it to silent and made myself a proper breakfast for once. By the time I strolled into the office at 8:30, the place was in controlled chaos. People rushed between departments, voices raised just below professional shouting level, and the distinct smell of panic mixed with burnt coffee filled the air. Julia. Marcus practically pounced on me. Thank God you're here. Harrington Freight needs an emergency modification to their routing system. They're launching a new distribution center and— Good morning, Marcus, I said pleasantly, settling into my chair. Did they submit a change request through the proper channels? His face fell. Julia, it's Harrington. They're 30% of our revenue. They need this done by noon or— Then they should have submitted the request with appropriate lead time, I replied, pulling up my officially assigned tasks for the day. I have scheduled maintenance on the backup systems this morning. The backup systems can wait. This is critical, I suggested. Then I'm sure Elaine will prioritize it appropriately when she arrives. Marcus stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Behind him, I could see Sarah from customer integration literally running toward the server room, laptop clutched to her chest. This was Harrington Freight, the white whale of logistics contracts, the client that could make or break quarterly earnings with a single decision. And they wanted what seemed like a simple change, adding a new distribution center to their routing algorithm. Simple, if you understood how I'd built the system. Catastrophic if you didn't realize that their routing preferences were hard-coded in 17 different places because of their unique requirements that had evolved over 3 years of handshake deals and verbal agreements. My email dinged. Priority message from Elaine. My office, now. I finished typing my sentence, saved my document, and took my time walking to the executive floor. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see a crisis meeting in progress VPs, directors, and what looked like half the IT department crowded around a conference table littered with laptops and coffee cups. Elaine's assistant didn't even announce me, just pointed urgently toward the office. I found Elaine pacing behind her desk, phone pressed to her ear, designer makeup already showing stress cracks. I understand your concerns, Mr. Harrington, she was saying. Yes, we value your partnership immensely. Yes, I understand the deadline. We'll make it happen. She hung up and whirled on me. Why aren't you fixing this? Fixing what, specifically? I asked, taking a seat without being invited. The Harrington situation. They need their new distribution center integrated by noon, or they're considering RevStream for their next contract renewal. RevStream, our biggest competitor. The magic words that could turn any executive's blood to ice water. I see, I said calmly. And what would you like me to do about it? Her face flushed. What I'd like you to do, fix it like you always do. I believe you made it clear that my work isn't essential, I reminded her. That anyone could do what I do, so perhaps one of those anyones should handle this. This isn't the time for games, Julia. I'm not playing games, I said, pulling out my phone to show her my calendar. I'm following protocols. I have scheduled maintenance from 9 to 11, then a mandatory compliance training, then lunch. I could potentially look at the Harrington issue at 2 p.m., assuming it's been properly prioritized through the ticketing system. 2 p.m. Her voice cracked. They need it by noon. Then perhaps someone more strategic should handle it, I suggested. After all, I'm just operational. She slammed her hands on the desk. Julia, I swear to God. Is there anything else? I interrupted. Because I really should get to that scheduled maintenance. We wouldn't want to fall behind on routine tasks. For a moment, I thought she might actually throw something at me. Her face cycled through several shades of red before settling on something between fury and desperation. Fine, she spat. We'll handle it without you. I stood, smoothed my skirt, and headed for the door. I'm sure you will. After all, I'm not irreplaceable. The next 3 hours were the longest and most entertaining of my career. From my desk, I had a perfect view of the chaos. The development team pulled up my documentation. 200 pages of perfectly accurate, completely useless information for anyone who didn't understand the why behind the what. I watched them try to trace the integration points, saw the moment they realized the routing algorithm touched systems they didn't even know were connected, watched the panic spread as noon approached, and Harrington's deadline loomed like an executioner's axe. At 11:58 a.m., my desk phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. At 12:03 p.m., Elaine appeared at my desk again, and this time, she wasn't alone. Mark Duvall, the CEO himself, stood beside her, his $1,000 suit doing nothing to hide the tension in his shoulders. "Ms. Morgan," he said, and I knew things were about to get interesting. "We need to talk." The call came at 2:17 p.m., not to my desk phone, which I'd been studiously ignoring, but to my personal cell. Mike from Network Operations, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Julia, I'm sorry to bother you, but we've got a situation, a bad one." I was sitting in the break room, enjoying a leisurely coffee while watching the chaos unfold through the glass walls. "What kind of situation, Mike?" "Someone tried to implement the Harrington change without understanding the dependencies. They pushed it to production and..." His voice cracked. "Julia, 60% of our routing system is down. Orders aren't processing. Trucks don't know where to go. It's cascading through everything." I stirred my coffee slowly. "That sounds serious. Have you contacted Elaine? She's the one who oversees strategic operations." "Elaine." He laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "Elaine locked herself in her office 20 minutes ago. Mark's ready to fire half the department. We're hemorrhaging money, $2 million an hour. They're saying, maybe more. $2 million an hour. I'd built that system to handle billions in transactions, to route hundreds of thousands of packages daily across the globe, and someone had broken it trying to add one distribution center. The board's in emergency session," Mike continued. "Harrington's threatening to pull their entire contract. But Julia, that's not even the worst part." "Oh." "The fix someone tried to implement, it's corrupted the backup sync. We can't roll back to a stable version. Every minute we're down. The corruption spreads deeper into the historical data." I set down my coffee cup carefully. This was worse than I'd anticipated. I'd expected inconvenience, delays, maybe some lost revenue, but data corruption, that could take weeks to fully resolve. If they even could resolve it without understanding the intricate web of dependencies I'd built. "Julia, please, I know something's going on between you and management, but we need you. The company needs you." Through the break room window, I could see the executive floor, people running between offices, papers flying, the kind of kinetic desperation that only comes when millions of dollars are evaporating by the minute. "I'll need to check my schedule," I said. "I have mandatory compliance training at 3. "Compliance training." His voice rose an octave. "Julia, we could lose everything. RevStream already has reps in the Harrington building. They smell blood in the water." My phone buzzed with another call. Mark Duvall's personal line. I declined it. "I understand the severity," I told Mike, "but I've been explicitly told to focus on my assigned duties. I wouldn't want to overstep." "This is insane. You built this system. You're the only one who..." "Who?" "What?" I interrupted. "The only one who understands it. But that can't be true. Elaine assured me that anyone could do my job, that I'm not essential." Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "We both know that's bullshit. Julia, do we..." Because last week, I was told quite clearly that my contributions were operational, not strategic, that I was replaceable within a week. "Julia, I have to go. Mike, my compliance training starts soon." I hung up and watched the show continue. Through the windows, I could see the main operations floor, where our routing system usually displayed a beautiful web of green lines showing packages flowing across the country. Now it looked like a Jackson Pollock painting, red errors splattered everywhere, warning messages cascading across screens, and operators standing helplessly as their carefully orchestrated logistics ballet collapsed into chaos. My phone rang again, and again. I turned it face down and went back to my coffee. At 2:47 p.m., security appeared in the break room. Tom, the head of building security, looked deeply uncomfortable. "Ms. Morgan, Mr. Duvall requests your immediate presence in the executive conference room." "Requests?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Tom shifted his weight. "Strongly requests, with extreme urgency, please." I glanced at my watch. "I have compliance training in 13 minutes. "Ms. Morgan," Tom's voice dropped. "They're saying if we don't get the system back online in the next hour, We might lose half our contracts. There's talk of an emergency acquisition by RevStream. People could lose their jobs. Good people. He was right. The security team, the drivers, the warehouse workers, the customer service reps, none of them had anything to do with Elaine's power games. They were just people trying to make a living, and they'd be the first casualties if the company went under. But then again, I was just a replaceable cog, wasn't I? Tell Mr. Duval I'll be there after my compliance training, I said, standing and brushing imaginary crumbs from my skirt. Following protocol is very important, after all. Tom's shoulders sagged. Julia, please. 4 p.m., I said firmly. If the matter is still urgent, then I'll be happy to discuss it, within the scope of my defined responsibilities, of course. As I walked past him toward the training room, I caught a glimpse of the main display board in the operations center. The number at the bottom, estimated revenue loss, was spinning upward like a slot machine from hell. 2.3 million, 2.4, 2.5. All because someone thought the architect wasn't essential to the building staying upright. At 4 p.m. sharp, I walked into the executive conference room. The scene that greeted me looked like a corporate war room after a losing battle. Empty coffee cups littered the table. Laptop screens glowed with error messages, and the smell of desperation hung thick in the air. Mark Duval stood at the head of the table. His usual CEO composure cracked like a dam about to burst. Around him sat the entire C-suite, several board members on video screens, and Elaine, who looked like she'd aged 5 years in as many hours. Ms. Morgan, Mark said, his voice carefully controlled. Thank you for joining us. I took the only empty seat, directly across from Elaine. Of course. How can I help? Cut the crap, snapped CFO Harrison Wells. You know exactly why you're here. The system's been down for 4 hours. We've lost $12 million and counting. Harrington's gone. Peterson Industries is threatening to follow. Our stock price is in free fall. That sounds serious, I said mildly. Mark raised a hand to silence Harrison. Julia, I'll be direct. What will it take to get you to fix this? Fix what? Exactly, I haven't been briefed on the specific issue. The issue, Mark said through gritted teeth, is that someone tried to modify the routing system without understanding how it works. They've corrupted not just the main system but the backups. We've had 3 teams trying to untangle it, but he gestured helplessly at the screens showing endless error logs. I see. And why wasn't I consulted before this modification was attempted? Elaine's face flushed. Because you were being deliberately obstructive. You refused to help with a critical client request. I followed protocol, I corrected. As you've made clear, I should focus on my defined responsibilities and not exceed my role. This is not the time for petty grievances, board member Margaret Stewart interjected from the screen. Ms. Morgan, what do you need to